So I set up a hello world for our last lecture demo here. So in the labs, I do not have the, this is the thing that changing the 31s to 30s and changing the dependencies gets an empty activity hello world to work for me so far. So, but I didn't get much time to spend on getting a bottom navigation app to work. And some people work in the labs almost exclusively. And so for that reason, and I'll have to put this in the announcements, but for that reason, there will be one dropped lab. So there's one lab that if you haven't done it, you can, it may be on the test. It's probably not a wise idea for you to skip labs, but there's the one I'm having difficulties with and some people can't do. So I will drop one lab for everybody. It could be that lab, it could be some other lab. You don't have to tell me which lab you're dropping or anything like that. I'll just have Excel take care of it. So Excel will drop a lab grade. Okay. Anything else? And so that's one thing. The other thing is I found somebody making these changes in the morning section on his laptop. That's not necessary. This is a, you know, an in the lab situation where IT hasn't updated, but something else has updated and we're in this kind of weird limbo. And this is the workaround. On your computer, you can update, so you won't need to do this on your laptop. So no reason to do this other than in the lab when we have to. Other side of the coin. I usually start a demo for you, a working code, and I usually start with a hello world and build up. Because things can go wrong even with hello world, like this Gradle, but also the emulator can be messed up and need to be wiped. So sometimes you need a new emulator, sometimes you need to wipe your old emulator. And it's easiest to discover this thing when you have something very simple like hello world and then build up from there. That's why I recommend that approach. Not everybody will take that approach, but that to me makes the most sense. We have next week, this will be the last lecture lab. Next week will be time to work on labs and or the project. And then in the finals week, our test, we meet Tuesday, Thursday at 3:30. And so here is the exam time, and that is 4. And that's like a 1 hour, 45-minute period. So instead of more than our usual 75. While the bottom navigation thing didn't work and won't work in this lab, so I won't put that on the test. We did do an alternative where the main activity was sort of a menu that took you to different activities. And that also gave me an excuse to work with shared preferences and to sort of to save some data from one of those to the next. So that is, so you might expect that on the third test. You won't see a bottom navigation on the test, but you might see something of a similar nature with multiple activities. Okay. All right. So we know what's coming up next week. Time to work on labs and project. Then the Thursday of finals week will be our third test. A little bit more time for that test. Okay. And okay, so let's now do this last demo app I want to show you, and then the lab, which is not too much connected today. And modules. Okay, so I'm going to show you this NFL from JSON. So it's another one of those. This one, the JSON's not complicated so much as maybe what I do with it is a little more complicated. But it's that sort of a little bit more with JSON than the sort of normal amount. But what your lab is back to XML. Here, download it. And this is, as I said, I have a working hello world. That is my usual preferred starting point. And I'm going to bring the layout in. Okay, so now I have the layout. Things open. And there is a raw. So I'm going to, under res, I'm going to make a new directory called raw. When you do the lab and you're using XML, then the my example anyway puts the XML in a directory called XML. Not in layout with other XMLs, not in values with other XMLs, but it's in its own little directory called XML. So the code that I've given you to read the file assumes that there's an XML resource labeled XML, in a directory labeled XML. So don't sort of not follow my rules and expect something to work. Okay, so now then I have, but this was JSON, and JSON I'm putting in raw. And now that I have the raw made, I'm going to put that JSON into raw. And while the JSON is popping up, let's discuss its structure. It starts with a curly bracket. That means an object. So when we get to code, I should start with an object. That object has a property called NFL, and that property is an array, and it's an array of objects with properties like city, team, name, conference. So what else do I have that I want to paste over? There's nothing in values, nothing in bitmap. We copied over the raw, we copied over the layout. There is a bunch of images of NFL logos, and I'm going to copy those and put them in the drawable. I thought I had it pasted, but I've done it. Try it again. I seem to have cut them rather than. So somehow I lost my images, so I must re-download. Okay. Resources, drawable. Somehow I managed to delete them rather than copy them. copy, try again, and paste into drawable. Okay, so there are a bunch of images of team logos in the drawable in the resources. Okay. Long ago, when I first did this exercise, the files were, I had as just one .png and two .png, and that failed miserably because it doesn't obey the naming scheme of Android. So Android wants it to start with small letters. It doesn't like capital letters. We know that. It doesn't like spaces. We know that. It allows numbers, but it doesn't allow it to start with a number. So when I had just numbers way back when, it didn't work. So I renamed the files and put a little A in front. Okay. So I copied over the raw, I copied over the layout, I copied over draw. So now I'm ready for the code. I'm going to highlight all the package and I'm going to paste all the package. Okay. And let's run it, see what it does, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So I have, there's the NFC and the AFC, and then there's the east, north, south, and west. And then if I pick a division and a conference, then it gives me the teams in that division and conference. And then I can pick the team, and it's going to show me the coach and the team logo. So that's what this does. All right, so let's have a look. So the JSON is fairly my sort of normal JSON. It was an object, that object had a property, that property is an array, it's an array of objects with these key value pairs. And that's all there is. Okay, there are no arrays within arrays or anything like that. So it is straightforward in that format. So in this way, it's easier than when I had painters and paintings, which was our example of somewhat more complicated JSON. There we had like an array within an array. So here it's just an object with a property, then it's an array of objects. So not as complicated as arrays within arrays. But I'm going to do like a more complicated analysis of the JSON here. And I'm not going to say, oh, I know the conferences are the NFC and the AFC. I'm going to let that come out of reading the file. So I'm going to read all of my teams, and I'm going to say, what is your conference? And if it's a conference I haven't seen it before, I'm going to add it to my list of conferences. So if they added a third conference and had it in the data, I'd be fine with that. Same thing for the division. I'm not going to assume the divisions are east, west, north, south. I'm going to just discover from the data what the divisions are. And then, so that's one thing. So I'm discovering these conferences and these divisions. Okay, from what's in the file. Because the file could be, I could have said, oh, here is my conference, and then here are my divisions within my conference, so have an array within an array. And then I said, it could have said, here are my teams within my division within my conference. So I could have had an array within an array within an array. I didn't do that. I just focused on the teams because I wrote this file for something else, and so this is the way I had the file. But I just decided to, again, discover the conferences and the divisions. Now the set of teams, then I show down here, depend on what's going on up here. So if I change the division or if I change the conference, the set of teams changes based on that. So again, if you remember when we did our more complicated example, we had painters, and when we chose a painter, then we showed the paintings corresponding to that painter. This time there are two things that can change, the conference and the division, and either change will lead to a change in the teams. And I didn't want to repeat my code of loading up the teams. And so I'm going to write that in a separate function. I'm going to make a function for loading up the teams. And from that, I'm going to call that function from either spinner event. So if the conference spinner changes, I'll call that function. If the division spinner changes, I will call that function. So here we go. So let me just show that down here. I have it outside of onCreate. Here's my load teams function. Okay. And here's me calling load teams when they change the spinner, and here's me calling load teams when they change the conference. So what does that affect? That is some nice organizing thing. I don't have to repeat this code, but that forces me into some decisions up front. I want my JSON to be available when I choose a team. I want some information about that team, and that's in my JSON. So I wanted that to be a global or class level variable. So I have this not inside onCreate, but above. In main activity, so it's inside the class, but it's not inside this onCreate method. And Kotlin, all the modern languages like to initialize right away, and but I can't. I want to declare it at the global or the class level so that everybody has access to that information, but I can't initialize because I have to get the resource and read the resource, and I can't do that right away. So that's why I have the late init. So the late init says, I want to have this thing, I want it to be global, but I can't initialize it just now. I also have to make it a var, not a val, because val means I'm not going to change it, but I'm going to start off with nothing and then make it something. So that's a change, so it's got to be a var. And what else do I have to watch out for? When I finally get ready to use this thing, the JSON array, I had the JSON array was up here, defined at the class level. Here's my var, it's going to change. When I get down here, I have to make sure that I don't have a var there. Otherwise, I will have two variables with the same name which have different scopes. And so if I'm in onCreate, I'll be using one, and if I'm outside onCreate, I'll be using the other, and they won't be the same, and that will be a problem. So make sure if you are declaring globally, that's where the var goes. And then when you're finally ready to initialize, no var. And I did the same thing for the spinners and the text view and the image view. I made them all late inits. I said what kind of thing they are. I made it a var so I could change it. And then down here is my usual connect to the interface stuff, but no val, no var. So that was fun. All right. Strictly speaking, I don't use the, I use these, I use the spinners, the conference spinner and the division spinner sort of in on create and otherwise. But some of these things like the text view and the image text view, I only really use down here. So I could have made them local to this function. I did not, but I could have. Okay, okay. Here's the input stream going to the raw resource of the NFL, which is a JSON. Here's us using the stream that we just set up to read the file. Here is us converting that file, interpreting that file as JSON. One more time, look at the JSON. It starts with an object. So the first thing I do to my text is say JSON object. Using it was an object, so I applied JSON object to it. I had a couple people on the JSON file part of exam 2 had lots of nice code, but it was all didn't work because I gave them an object and they assumed it was an array. You must always look at the JSON and see what it's handing. Handing me an object, so I start with an object. That object has an array. Then I get the array from the object. So here's my object, and I'm getting the array from the object. It's not always like that. It depends on the JSON. There are JSONs that start with arrays. Then you would say JSON array up here from the start. So I've read in the JSON, I read in the file, I interpreted it as JSON, I got from the JSON object the JSON array. As I said, I'm going to pretend I don't know my conferences and divisions. So I'm making an array list of them. This, I can tell by the gray underline, I'm not really using. I use it below, so I'll declare it all over again then. So this could just go bye-bye. I'm looping over my JSON. I'm getting an object from the JSON array. I'm getting the ith object. I'm getting its conference and its division. And here's me sort of saying, if I don't have that conference already, then add it to my list of conferences. So I use index of, which does a search. I'm searching for this ith conference, this conference of the ith element. And if it's not in my list of conferences, so the index would, if I don't find something, the index turns out to be a -1. So if I don't find it, then add it. Same thing for divisions. If I don't find my division, so if it's -1, then add it. So now I know the list of divisions and conferences. And so I can set up an adapter of conferences, an adapter of divisions. And I have their handlers. And I just say, when I change the conference or when I change the division, I want to load up the teams. So I call my function load teams. I declared that function outside of onCreate, and that gave me some scope issues, which I talked about. So here's load teams. Setting an adapter to null clears out anything that used to be there before. We saw that before with the artists. If I have a new artist, I get rid of the old artist's paintings. I'm finding the conference from the spinner, the division from the spinner. I'm looping through my array of NFL teams here, and I'm getting the object, in this case, the jth object. And if the, I'm finding the conference and the division, and if the, so there was a user conference and a user division, and then I'm looping through all of my teams. And if the conference matches, the conference of the team matches what the user wants, and the division matches, then I want that team. So I get the city and the team, and I am making a city dash team combination and making an array of that, which I will use as my adapter. So here in this list, I have the city, Indianapolis, and then a dash Colts. I had at first, the first time I did this, I was using a space as a delimiter. And then I had complications where New York had a space. And so it was more complicated for me to use the space as a delimiter since some of my city names already had a space in them. And I had to be more careful about which space I was using as a delimiter. And then Washington went and changed its team name to just football team. And so now they had a space in the team name. And so sometimes I had spaces in the city and sometimes I had spaces in the team, and it became too difficult to use the space also as my division, my delimiter between a city and a team. So I made it a dash. But if you have choice over the delimiter, then choose a simple delimiter. I was making my life hard with the space, and then life became too hard, and I just changed my delimiter, and life was much easier. So here's the set up the adapter for the team, and here's when I choose a team. When I choose a team, I know here's me connecting to the interface, getting the TV coach and the ID. I have the val here, so this, I'm not using this one actually. I'm not using this because I sort of did it all over again down here. So I don't think I need these. I think it would work without this. Or if I have this, then I don't need what I have above. So it's a little bit redundant. Sorry, I'll do better next time. Okay, so they chose a team. I have to figure out which team they chose. So I took what was in the spinner and I split it, and now I know the team. And I'm doing a search. So I'm looping through my objects and trying to find when the team from my list matches the team that the user chose. And then I'm displaying the information, the coach name, and the football logo for that team. And then I'm done. So that was just sort of JSON, which we've done before. Not a more complicated JSON, but maybe a more complicated analysis of a basic JSON. And some worrying about scope. Okay. That was that. That looks good. Any questions? All right, so let's look at what you have to do, which is something different, which is with XML. I close my browser. That's smart of me. And we'll go with Canvas 34922 modules. Last module, yay. Topos from XML. So I have a bunch of checkboxes. I provided some checkboxes, but if you want to do dynamic checkboxes, if you find that easier, then you can just take my checkboxes out. So I have some checkboxes with a systematic name. I don't know, check ingredient 0, check ingredient 1, check ingredient 2. If you find that useful, then use it. If not, get rid of them and make it dynamic. I don't care. But there's an XML file with ingredients, with also nutritional information about the ingredients. And then the user checks what they want in their taco. And then you fill up the, sort of add up the nutritional stuff here. Now, I don't know why I'm adding the serving. That makes no sense, but the other things make sense. Okay. So you probably just take serving out because that makes no sense. But calories, fat, cholesterol, carbohydrates, fiber, protein, those things I'll add. Okay, so we're reading XML. So you're going to read XML. Remember, put XML in an XML directory. We're going to make an object that when we read the XML makes objects of that class. So we're going to make a class. We'll make objects of that class. We'll make sort of an array list of objects of the class of ingredient. Let's have a look at the XML. I don't know if I want to open it, but no. We'll have XML. Notepad++. Okay, so there's an element, and so between each ingredient begins and ends with element. And one thing to watch out for is name. That does not, I don't know if you can have a property called name in your class. So that you may have to, so that's what's in the XML, but you may have to change it to ingredient or ingredient name or something. I don't know if that may be a reserved word. So watch out for that. Okay. But make an ingredient class with all this stuff. Read the XML file, make yourself an array list of things. Associate each checkbox with an element of your array list. Again, you can either delete mine and make your own from scratch dynamically, or you can just sort of put the text in to my checkbox that is already there, either way. When they check the checkbox, it's going to, so there's like, serving should be taken out. That makes no sense now that I think about it, but all the other things, there'll be sort of 6 running totals here. And when you check a checkbox, it's going to figure out that, that nutritional thing for that ingredient and add it. So as they check boxes, you can just clear it and make them hit the total button. If you want to take away my total button and just have the addition going as they check and uncheck things, that's possible, and you can do that. With the button, I'm trying to make your life easier. If you don't like the button or you think it's not easier, then by all means click the button. Just watch the types. Some of the numbers here, for instance, what? Servings, that's not very, oh, here's a fiber, which is a half. Some of the numbers have a fractional part, so some of the numbers can be integer, but some of them definitely have to be. So here's a fat, which is 1.5. Here's a fiber, which is 1/2. So those two things have to be floats or doubles or something that can have a fractional value. And on this, the last time I taught this course, then I taught checkboxes and XML in the sort of same test unit. And so that's why you've now seen checkboxes and XML together twice in the short films and here in the taco. But we've already tested checkboxes. So you might expect to see XML on test 3. I don't think I would give you checkboxes on test 3 since I already tested that. Spinners I just love and they always come back, and pictures I love and they always come back. But checkboxes, I've probably done my checkboxes for you. And so don't get the idea that if he has XML, he has checkboxes. It was just those two units happened to occur together in previous versions of this course. This semester they got separated. So I probably not combine them again. Any questions? All right, so I will, I think I've been recording. I'll stop recording.